So, welcome to my talk on advanced migration techniques. It's very similar to one that I did in Cluj in Romania at Dev Days. Pretty far away from here, very far. My name is Sipos. Right off the bat, I would like to make a disclaimer that I'm just coming off of a 2-week road trip, vacation in California. So for me, no Drupal for 2 weeks, no work, no nothing. So if I seem like I don't know what I'm talking about, it's probably true anyway, but maybe blame it on that first. Yeah, so I renamed a bit the talk to advanced migration techniques because I thought maybe I'll touch upon some other things, but the main topic is building dynamic migrations. We'll explain this. Of course, it's not switching slide, right? I have to do it with the mouse. So yeah, my name is Sipos. You may know me from my website, Drupal. I'm Romanian. I live in Belgium, in Brussels. So as I said, I came here on a bit of a holiday, so I thought I'd try out US Drupal camp. It's my first time. So yeah. I also wrote this book. I have one here. I could only bring one for some reasons. So I'm going to give this out to somebody. I will ask you later a question. If somebody can answer the question, I will give you a book. Yeah. All right. So what are we going to talk about? So in order to understand the dynamic migrations topic, which is the main one, we're going to go through a couple of points going from a bit easier stuff. I don't know exactly the experience level of people here. Probably everybody knows everything already, but nonetheless, you have to cover some of it. So first we're going to see, okay, what the migration is, what is composed of, things like that. And we're going to talk a bit about the ecosystem around migrations. And by the way, since we had this chat before, none of this will be about Drupal to like Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migrations or Drupal 6 or whatever. It's actually from custom data sources. So then we're going to see how to write a basic migration, a simple taxonomy term import from CSV data source. And then building upon that, we're going to write a dynamic migration to import the translations of these terms. This is very important where I come from, translations, multilingual. I understand that maybe in the United States is less so potentially, but yeah, for us it's critical. All the code that you see here and a lot more you can find in this repository of mine, in which I put some other fun stuff plus this. I'm going to reference this later in the slides as well. So let's see. Earlier in the intro slide, I had mentioned dynamic migration using templates. I put this in quotes because they're not actually templates. Don't think quick templates or anything like that. I use this word because I think it is a bit fitting, but there used to be templates in the early versions of Drupal 8 when it was actually configuration based. Like they were configuration entities and they were used for the Drupal to Drupal migration. Like core would ship with these config entities, which were like templates. Then they get hydrated with some other information, and then you can like migrate from Drupal to Drupal. That's all been deprecated. They don't exist anymore. Maybe they do, but they're not used anymore. And in fact, now we are all talking about plugin derivatives, which is a bit of an advanced concept, but that's what is going to be the main thing that we're going to see here. All right, so what is a migration? Well, at its most basic explanation, it's a plugin, right? Everybody knows what plugins are. Can I get that? Okay, good. I don't have to explain that. I mean, okay, they're like encapsulated bits of functionality which can be swapped. So, for example, if a subsystem has to perform a task, it can architect it in a way in which that task can be performed in different ways. So, for example, the user then chooses, okay, do it this way or do it this way. Fields, etc. Drupal core plugins, all of it almost. So yeah, migrations themselves are plugins based in YAML. So many of us are used to annotation-based plugins, such as blocks, right? But these are YAML-based, such as menu links, for example. All right, the migration essentially defines how the whole procedure will work. So it orchestrates the various plugins that come into play, source, process, destination, in order to run successfully the whole thing. We will mention briefly in the future, in the next slides, maybe the plugin types. Aside from that, you also have some metadata info, as you will see, like ID, label, dependencies, things like that. So they're there. And somewhere down in the process, very important to know that it keeps an ID map between the source ID. I do not want to upgrade Java now. So between the source IDs and the destination IDs, right? So source data always has to have an ID, and obviously the destination is always going to have an ID, and it keeps this map. And this map is similar to how it was in Drupal 7 is very important. Also, it writes migration messages in a special table if something goes wrong, etc. All right. So like I mentioned, these are the three: source, process, destination. I'm just going to quickly go through these. Source plugins have a very important job, really important. And that is to read, understand, and iterate over the data. Right, so basically, they understand the data and provide rows of records. And this data can be CSV, SQL, JSON, XML, whatever. We have a bunch of them already, both in core and in contribute, but if not, you can write your own. They're not the easiest, well, they're also not difficult, but the iteration thing is you need to make sure that the data source is correct. Destination plugins. So these are closely related to the target application. In our case, it's Drupal 8, of course, so not many surprises there. Typically, we will save data into entities, be that config or content entities. I think even config objects, simple config, but I'm not super sure. And their main job is to save the data as it came from the source, process, and save into the entity, as well as delete the entities. So in the process of loading that. You won't need to write your own. Because for what, you don't really have other places you want to store data, like in state or whatever, so it's part of migrations. Process plugins, however, these are the fun guys. We have many of them, both in core and maybe even more in compute. Essentially, they do a few things. Two. They map data to fields, to Drupal fields. We will see exactly how. So for each Drupal field that we want to migrate into, we use a plugin to specify how that data is mapped and migrated. And in this process, also what they call process plugins, this data can be transformed, manipulated in any shape or form, skipped, filtered, whatever. I mean, this is where I think migrate shines a lot. And the cool thing is that they are chainable. So that means you can have, you can create a chain of multiple plugins so that, okay, the first one does something and then passes the results to another one like this, and then it gets stored into the destination. Typically these are needed because source data is crap, it's always bad, you never get nice data when you're migrating from wherever. So this is where you're going to work a lot and tinker and make sure that the style tags from the body field of the old website get removed, right? Things like that. then there's this guy, which kind of like, and it's in the name. It executes the migrate executable. So its main job is to import, to run the whole process, or to roll it back, to delete it saves the data, it saves the ID map, saves the messages, runs the process plugins onto the data that is given by the source plugins, and then asks the destination to save. Basically the whole thing. Programmatically, you can run migrations using this. So you just call it and run it. It's pretty easy. You can make your own rush commands and do it. But you don't have to because you have migrate tools. So, okay, so these were the main guys of like the migration architecture. There's definitely nuances and all sorts of other players involved, but not really important for us now. But then there's these guys who are also very important. So Migrate Plus is a contributed module which provides a lot of things that if you're going to write migrations, you're going to need. I mean, if somebody told me that they wrote a migration without Migrate Plus installed, I'm not going to believe them. They provide a lot of source plugins, a lot of process plugins. For example, string replace, which does what it says, right? You configure it to just replace one part of the string from the source data with another, with string replace. PHP. Very simple, very needed sometimes, right? Because we all have the HTTP thing in the body field all the time. We also have things like skip on value, I think skip on empty, which literally skip either the process or the entire record if the value is of a certain, if it's a certain value or whatever. So a lot of process plugins. You should check it out because it's really interesting. Before even thinking of writing your own, it's good to check it out. Another cool thing that Migrate Plus brings to the table is the URL-based source plugin. This is what you need to use if your source data is in JSON. So it provides a source plugin that is able to take data from a URL. Literally just the URL. That URL can be like a simple URL which returns data, or it can be a file. But in order for it to be able to understand and work with all this, it provides another plugin type, two plugin types actually. The data fetcher and data forwarder, and the data parser plugins. The data fetcher is able to take the data from that endpoint, like I said, like a URL or file, and the parser is able to understand it and iterate over it. Like for example, the JSON one is then able to iterate it with JSON records, or XML or SOAP, etc. So definitely do check that out in case you need to use JSON, for example, because that's popular as a data source. That's why I mentioned it here. Side note, in my repository, you'll find a not super, let's just say, performant, but good example of using these plugins to import data from the JSON source. It needs to be refactored to work with large numbers, but that can be done as well. Alright, Migrate Tools is another one which I dare you to write and run migrations without it. It doesn't provide the push commands to run the migrations. Without that, you can only do it programmatically, which is also an option, but why? It does all sorts of other stuff. It extends the executable actually as well. It provides some handy command options such as IDs and things like this. And there's others. But before we continue, the Migrate Source CSV module, which does one thing, it provides a source CSV source plugin for CSV files. I use this extensively because I like migrating from CSV files. So like when I do Drupal to Drupal migrations, I export all my data from Drupal 7 or 6 or whatever into CSV files. I'm able to see a bit what's going on there, and then use these and create migrations from the CSV files. It's just my personal preference. Doesn't matter, but the module works well. Alright, so now we're going to look at how to do all these things together, put all these things together into a basic migration, right? So this is our data. We have a CSV file of what are these, like categories, like language example, what? Translated into Romanian. This was for my Drupal Romanian thing, so. And the ID column, right? The key observer will notice that the IDs are not like that by accident, but they reflect the hierarchical structure and relationship between the terms. So meaning that alcohols is on the beverages and beers is on the alcohols. Not important for today, but in my repository you'll find a custom process plugin that actually makes it so that it gets imported and the structure is reflected. So the terms become hierarchical by reading that. It's super simple. But yeah, it's creativity that you have to employ here because you have all the tools. Okay, so what we will do now is import these into a categories vocabulary. So we will start just with the English version, label and column. And later we will import the translations. Once again, the repository. And by the way, if you clone this repository and you use Docker, you've got like 2 commands and you have a site running with all the things imported, enabled, installed. You run brush, you clear the cache and you run brush ms and you will see all these migrations that we're talking about right now. So it's really fast to set it up, to play around. Okay, this is a bit of a problem, right? Can you see? Is it visible? Okay. So this is what it looks in all of its glory. You probably already know this. By the way, who has written things like this before? Okay. So then I will explain. So this is a YAML-based plugin, as I mentioned. It goes into the migrations folder of our module. Typically, you will namespace the file with the module name, in this case, advanced migration, a dot migration, and then the ID of the migration. Right? Not even sure which of these are mandatory to be like this, but in any case, this is what you have to do. Because sometimes, just because something is not required, it doesn't mean you don't have to do it. And then we start with some metadata, so you can see from here. We got ID, label, migration group, things like this. There's some more we don't need then. And then we got the 3 main sections, which are the source, destination, and process. And this is where we define and orchestrate the migration using those 2 plugin types that we mentioned. We start with the first one and we say, okay, the plugin to use is CSV. And then the rest under this section are essentially configuring it. So all of the keys are specific to that plugin type, to that plugin, sorry. So let's say another plugin is not going to have the path, for example, or the column. Right? This is specific to CSV files. Okay. So the first thing, and that's very important, is to say where our file is there, is manner. Header row count, we have 1 header row. All the keys, okay, this is which is the main key, the V can be multiple. And then the column, right? This is a bit boring, this thing, especially if you have one like this many columns. So yeah, but we list them once and that's it. And that's it. We've configured our source file. Right? So now this guy is able to understand how CSV file is already. Then we've got a destination. We just say, okay, the destination is entity, and just save them as taxonomy terms. Finally, the fun part is the process plugin, where we map the fields, as I mentioned, and process them. Well, not much processing is happening here, but we will see a bit later. So first we have 2 fields that we need to migrate. We have the vid, which is the vocabulary ID, right? All terms need specific to go into a vocabulary. And here we use the default value plugin. What is this plugin? It essentially says, okay, for all the records, just use this default value to save. So all of them go into the category stuff. Super simple stuff. And then the last field is the actual one that we need, is the name of the term, and we just map this to the label _en. You'll notice there's no plugin reference here, like here. It doesn't mean we're not using a plugin. We're using what we call get, which all it does is copy over data. So it just takes the data from the data source and puts it into the destination. So it's very simple. So that's it with the basic migration. We can run it. So first, obviously, you have to clear the cache, make sure the module was enabled, things like that. Run the Josh MS migrate status. You'll see our one migration, and you can just import it. Just migrate, import categories, and then you'll have the terms in it. No hierarchical structure yet. And then we can roll it back with your commands. And this is my personal favorite thing about migrate is that we have the possibility to roll things back, meaning that it's not a one-time thing that you write a script. It's really a living thing. So it's worth putting in the effort of writing this correctly and cleanly, because then you can use it for all sorts of purposes. So I mentioned I'm not so interested in Drupal upgrades. So yeah, any questions so far? Maybe? No?
Sort of a question for the statement, but I think if there's anybody in there that's kind of entry-level, clearly labeled in advance, you have to at some point put this thing into Drupal. You know what I mean? You have to, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to kind of install it like manually. It doesn't, there's no UI that says, okay, I created this YAML file, now just see it there. Follow the point?
Yes, I do. Well, actually, the UI of it is this. This. Because, so you've added the YAML file there, everything is there correctly, on the install website, of course. Clear the cache, make sure that the thing shows up, and then you run the command. It's a drush command, which I guess everybody's going to have on your site, because it's a developer thing. There's no UI or need for a UI, at least not for this. So essentially, this is where you get it running. So you get the things imported. Running this one command is you're going to have the terms on your side.
How does Drush know where your YAML file is?
It's the discovery of the plugins. So because it's a plugin, plugins have a discoverability mechanism. In this case, it's YAML based. When the migration plugin type is defined in core, it says, okay, look in all the modules, migration folder. It's just like menus.
So once you run this the first time, now you do have something to see.
Yeah, of course. Right. You have the terms. Terms are migrated.
And it has created configuration.
No, it has not.
It's not.
There is. I think migrate tools used to create some configuration, but for the groups. So no, it does not create configuration. It doesn't need it because it's all in the file. You see, all the orchestration of how this would work is all defined in the file. So it can import based on that knowledge, and you can roll back this to the center.
It seems very simple for taxonomy, which is usually just a term.
Yeah.
But how about a content type that has dozens of fields? Let's say a dozen fields. Isn't that very hard to create that YAML file?
So the difference between this and those dozens of fields is that this is going to be bigger. So you're going to have multiple fields, mapping multiple source data. Obviously, you will have in your CSV file also multiple columns, right? And then you're going to say, okay, field underscore color then you say which column from the CSV is going to go into that, or whatever else. And if that data needs to be processed in some way, like cleaned up or whatever, then you specify a plugin to do that in the way you want. So, and literally that's the only difference. Of course, if you have a different source plugin, then this changes as well.
Is this migration going to create the categories vocabulary, or is
No.
this something you
No.
create that?
No, the categories vocabulary is assumed to be there.
Okay.
If you install from my repository, it will create a site with categories vocabulary. It's a very quick thing to set up. So it's literally you just run 2 commands. If you use Docker, it's Docker based. If you don't use Docker, sorry. So it's part of our local development setup that we use at the European. I work at the European Commission in Brussels. We use this command system, this task runner. That's just installs the site and I go to the configuration. All right, we can just talk a bit more at the end because I'm gonna finish before time. I guess I can answer all the questions. All right. So now that we have the terms, right? We should translate them. And here, the more complex part. Plugin derivatives. This slide is more generic. Does anybody know what derivatives are? Okay, that's fine. So, but you know at least now what plugins are. Okay, what's the most basic example of I'll explain it like this and then. So, plugin derivatives are instances of the same plugin. Okay, so you've got plugin types, local plugins, and then a derivative has nothing to do with finance, but the derivative is an instance of that one single plugin, and usually you have more. So meaning that, the reason for this is that you have one plugin that you define statically, so it has some commonality with all of the derivatives, but then each derivative has specificities that are dynamic, meaning that they are given by the state of your application, which we will see in a minute. So you can't write it in a YAML file because it needs to reprocess and understand what it should put in there. Drupal 7 reference. Do you remember in the info hooks in Drupal 7 all of the each hooks? Like for example, hook block info in core, the block info function, which looped through all of the, sorry? So it looped through all of the menus, for example, and then created a block for each menu. It's the same thing, except that it's now object-oriented, so we're doing this with a divider class instead of a procedural class. So, can anybody tell me? Well, if you don't know plugin derivatives, I wonder if somebody can tell me an example of plugin derivatives in Drupal 8, or in this case in Drupal 4, in which something like this might happen or would happen. I kind of gave it away already.
Translation.
Menus. So yeah, this was my question for the book. So you're gonna get the book.
Actually, I already own it, so.
Oh.
Now you gotta come up with another question.
Okay, another one. The thing is, I wanted to prepare a second, but I forgot. So like I'm really trying to. We'll do it at the end. Okay, we'll figure something out. I'm not leaving with it. So. Okay, so menu links, right? Blocks are used. So blocks and menu links is the other. The same. So Do you know how many links are work in Drupal 8? Like what is a menu link? It's a plugin as well, right? The YAML plugins, you put them in a YAML file in a module, like a module name .menu.links.menu.yaml, and then you define a menu, right? Then it shows up completely. But you can also create a menu link in the UI, right? You go to the UI, okay, that's an entity, in fact. So, what gives? How are these two working together? Well, they are two plugin releases. So essentially, Drupal core, the menu link content module, creates a menu link plugin. I'm using a DERIVER. It loads all of the existing menu links that you created in the UI, and for each creates a derivative. And this way, you have instances of the same plugin for each link of created. Okay, why do we need derivatives for our migration? Well, now we have one translation. We could technically write another migration and just import the translations of it. Maybe. What if we have 10 languages and copy this thing 10 times? Or if we need to add our state of the application changes and we need this to be reflected in the migration. This is when we use derivatives. So let's see how it works, because it's actually not that difficult. It's just getting to it that is the more complex part, figuring it out. But otherwise, it's not that complex. So we're writing another migration, just like the previous one. Just another YAML file. This one is just going to be called category translations. So remember the previous one we still have, right? We've even run it if we wanted to. So most of it is the same. Right? The source plugin definition is the same because we are looking at the same source, the same CSV file with the same data, etc. But now we have a key called DERIVER in which we reference our DERIVER class or categories and DERIVER. The absence of this means it's not with derivatives, its presence means it's with derivatives. And if this is here, we need to have that class. Then for the destination, we have another line here, which says that, okay, when you save the terms, allow to save translations. Don't make new terms, right? Because it could just make a new term. We don't want that, we want translations at the same time. Do you have any experience with translation or content entity translations? Okay. So this does that. Without this, it would say new. And then for the process plugins, we will cover in a moment the DERIVER process. But first, okay, the most important thing that you should notice here is that in the process block, we no longer have the name field. Right? Remember in the first one, we mapped the name field. Right? Label_en. But now we leave that out because that is literally what makes our thing dynamic. We don't know what name to put there, what column, because it's for each language. But we need to migrate the term ID because we don't want to create new ones. We want them to be saved as translations on existing, right, on the existing categories that have been migrated. And for this, we use the very powerful migration lookup plugin, process plugin, which, do you know what it is?
Looks up the table
Yeah.
to see what's been done already.
Yeah. So essentially, it looks into the ID map table to see, okay, my first term had the ID of 1 in the CSV, got saved with the ID of 10 in Drupal. So this guy says, okay, well, I want the value of this to be 10 because the ID of 1 was mapped to ID 10 in Drupal. So then with this, essentially, we connect them together. So we don't care about the order in which it's run. We just, this guy is, of course, the categories migration is to have been run before. Sure, otherwise there's no migration to do that. So yeah, this connects the two. And then this is again default value set to English, the content translation source field, which is a core field that is needed for translated entities to say, okay, I'm a translation of this entity and the original source language of the entity is English. Has nothing to do with the migrations. This is just what core says when you translate even something from the UI. That's it. And then we just put a dependency on our previous migration so that we can't run this without having run the other one because it just doesn't make sense. It's not very good rate. And third, it doesn't make sense. So that's pretty much it. As you can see, it's split into 2 slides, but I just wanted to make it bigger. So that's the reason. There's not much more to it. And the final part is that deriver class that we were talking about. So here's a couple of points on that. So it goes into my module namespace, right, in mass migration. It's called like this. And it has to extend the deriver base, which implements its own deriver interface, which has one method, get derivative definitions. And this method receives the base plugin definition as an argument. What is the base plugin definition? This in array format. So all of this comes one array, gets passed to the deriver, and then the deriver does whatever it wants with it. It can remove stuff, it can add stuff, it can change stuff, add more process plugins, even change the source. Like, I had the migration once in which I had changed the path of the source file dynamically. So the CSV file is located in different places. I put it. So things like that. Now, if we want to inject dependencies, which we do, we need to implement a container deriver interface, which will make it a container aware, to have a create method. You all know how to inject dependencies into services and stuff? So yeah, these are the highlights. And now we can just see the code of this method. Get derivative definitions. One method we need to implement, which returns the derivatives, of course. So first we get the languages on the site using the language manager, which I had injected, and for brevity I left it out. Okay, it's injected. And then we start looping to each other, looping through those. Kind of like the blocking. So we skip the English because that was our original migration categories. And then we create our derivative with this helper method, which we'll see in the next slide, using the base plugin definition that we got and the language, of course. So for each language, we make a derivative. Right? So in our case, the site has 2 languages, English and Romanian. So English will have already been imported, and now we will make a derivative for that migration in Romanian. And then we put them in this local variable. Not sure why, but only the driver seems to be putting that, putting it there, and then just return. And then the crux of the whole thing is in that helper method, in which we just do 2 little things. We take the base plugin definition, and you can see the structure, right? Process, like we have the keys in the YAML file. And then we have now, we need to put the name, right? We need to map the name of the term. But we have a little bit of complexity here. So just not looking at this for a second, look at the source. So we take the column dynamically, as you can see, based on the language ID, right? Label underscore and of the language. Okay, not going past the fact that the ID might be different than in the column, but okay. But we may run into a problem here. What if the site has 10 languages and we have like 2 translations in the file, the column is missing? It will, well, apart from the fact that it will break, but even if it didn't, you would have like missing data. You're creating a translation with missing data. That's not good. So for this we use the skip on empty plugin, which I think is provided by Migrate Plus, which essentially says, okay, if this thing doesn't have a value, just skip the whole thing, the row, not just the process of mapping that field, but the whole row. It doesn't do anything else, like, which for us is fine. We can have now 10 other languages, it will only make a derivative for remaining. There's only that language. As in, it will only import, sorry. So that's pretty much it. you can check out this plugin to see this documentation of that. And then the other one we have to map is the line code, right? Use again the default value plugin. And we just prepare it to the language code. This is normal. Each translation is to have a language code. And then we just return it. It will go into this, and then it will return all the That's pretty much it. Clear the cache. Migrate status will now show two migrations, categories, and then category translations, RO. It's because the ID of the derivative is given by the ID of the plugin, the ID that is found here, which in our case we just put the language. Right. For menu links, for example, we've got menu link content, that's the plugin name, the UUID of the menu link content. That's pretty much it. We can now run, even import all, and because of our dependency between the migrations, it will run them over to report the categories and that's pretty much it. Some conclusions. Yeah, I mean, migrations are awesome once you get to understand a bit how they work. There's a very strong ecosystem. Both Core has a lot of stuff already. Contributed module, especially migrate plus has and Italian stuff. So the needs for writing your own custom can go down and down. Super fast setup for migrations. Before, in the early days of Drupal 8, when there were templates and stuff, there was also configuration. You would create your YAML file, because there was still YAML files, obviously. You would install the module, and then you couldn't change it before deleting that configuration, or uninstalling the module, and reinstalling the module, which is crazy. Now it's not crazy. The process plugins are crazy. Just creativity is what's deciding the way. You can do whatever you want with your data. And then once you need to have these dynamic things based on the application, you can use them. So yeah, that's it, I guess. We can talk about anything. Any questions?
You have a technical question? My question is not technical.
Doesn't matter.
I think the answer to my question is actually no, because it sounds like this is intentionally not being integration. So my question was going to be, do you think there'll ever be, or if there's anyone with any intention of building a UI for this so that you don't have to write all the YAML from scratch? Because it seems to me that some of this could be fairly simply some fields filled in, some selections made from the dropdown. I could then write the YAML for you and choose to proper process plugins so that you're not constantly going back and forth with your documentation if you've never written migration before. And I can tell you as a site builder who doesn't write a lot of code. And we have at least 15 migrations, and I have looked through it, and made adjustments, and made some changes, and struggled my way through it. So I knew everything that we were talking about for the most part. But to do that in the UI, then it would have to be configuration, right? Because you're not, you're not writing for an external YAML file for the UI without having it stored somewhere in the database, right? So I guess the answer is no.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not? Oh, good.
So, first and foremost, yes, this is for developers. So, but second of all, I heard, I do not know exactly, but I heard that the feeds module is being rewritten to YAML feeds, right? Is being rewritten to use migrate in the back, to be powered by migrate, which I think is good that they're doing that and they're not doing their own thing, because that wasn't really good. And in which case, that's what it would be, right? Because feeds is always a UI thing, which you just configure the mappings. It's been so long since I used feeds, it's crazy. So that would be the thing. But there would be nothing else that could be used for this. So it's always developer to write these kind of like custom sources. But with Fizz, I think we'll be able to like, okay, give it the CSV file and it's okay.
Yeah, there's obviously use cases where it's going to be too complicated and that UI would not be practical.
Yeah.
But at least you get the basics of it going and then you need to calculators and things of that nature. Then at some point you got into code, but it would be, yeah, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah.
I think Tigor was just giving a talk on the
Yeah.
integration.
I saw that and it was like, okay, I can split myself in half on more to this than the rest of it, because that was a lot of migration from previous versions of Drupal.
I wonder why they put all the migration stuff at the same time.
There's three right now.
If somebody is interested in the migration, they should be able to work all
Yeah.
that.
Live in my world right now.
Yeah.
Can't be three places at
Where,
once.
where can we find like a prototypical, quintessential YAML file so we can sort of learn from this like template?
Well, definitely there is documentation on Drupal report. There is the basic migration here. I mean, you can check in my repository. Of course, that goes a bit more advanced as well. I have also this slide, which I didn't go into, which is crazy. Commerce product imports and variations and stuff like that. But yeah, you can check out my repository. But I would first start from Drupal repository.
The Drupal Plus module has
Yes, there is the example stuff.
And when I was actually trying to manipulate one of my existing migrations, I was doing some searching. I found quite a bit of stuff on the web. Actually, there's some decent examples out there.
Yeah.
There's a few tutorials that are not hard to find, but actually really good.
There is that beer one, right? The examples module.
Yeah.
The beer migration and the wine migration. Everybody
Yeah.
likes that.
It was
Okay.
Great talk. Thank you.